I shouldn't have been out in the woods that night. The wind bit at my cheeks, carrying a chill that seeped into my bones, and yet I couldn't stay inside. Something was calling me, though I didn't know what. I told myself it was curiosity, or perhaps the loneliness that had been settling into my chest like a heavy stone. But deep down, I knew it was something else, something I couldn't name. The forest had always been a place of quiet for me. When I was a child, my grandmother would take me here, teaching me the names of the trees, how to follow the trail of fox prints, how to listen to the wind as if it were a voice. Now, years later, I walked the familiar paths with a tension I couldn't explain. Every snap of a twig made my pulse jump. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a whisper meant only for me. I paused at a small clearing. Moonlight spilling silver over the frost-covered ground. My breath steamed in the cold air as I knelt to examine a cluster of wildflowers, stubbornly surviving under the first frost of winter. For a moment, the ordinary world felt safe, beautiful. I breathed in the sharp, pine-scented air and let myself imagine that nothing unusual existed outside this quiet bubble of light and shadow. Then I saw it a flicker in the trees. A shadow taller than any animal I knew, moving with a fluid, deliberate grace. I froze, heart thundering in my chest. My rational mind screamed at me to turn and run back to the warmth of my cabin, yet something held me there. I felt a strange pull, as if the forest itself had reached out to anchor me in place. I shouldn't be here, I whispered to myself. The words barely audible over the pounding of my heart. But even as I said it, I knew I wasn't alone. The shadow paused, tilting its head slightly. And for the first time, I had the overwhelming sense that it was watching me not with hunger or malice, but with recognition, like it knew me. I shook my head and tried to reason with myself. Wolves, maybe. A deer. Something ordinary. Yet every instinct in me screamed otherwise. There was a presence, something alive and intelligent in the darkness. Something that didn't belong entirely in the ordinary world I had always known. I took a cautious step back, my boots crunching softly against the frost-hardened leaves. The shadow moved again, slipping silently between the trees, closer this time, though still out of reach of the pale moonlight. I wanted to call out to ask who or what was there, but my voice caught in my throat. Fear, yes, but also a strange, thrilling curiosity. Something inside me was stirring, spark I hadn't felt in years. I remembered the dreams, the strange, vivid dreams I had been having for weeks. Dreams of glowing amber eyes in the dark, of running through the forest with someone or something always just out of reach. Dreams that left me waking in the middle of the night, heart racing, feeling the brush of a presence that wasn't there when I turned on the lights. I had dismissed them as imagination, the remnants of old folk tales my grandmother used to tell me. But now, standing in the clearing, the dreams felt less like dreams and more like warnings. Or invitations. A cold breeze rustled through the branches above, carrying a scent I couldn't place. Musky, wild, and something softer underneath, like wood smoke and rain-damp earth. Mixed with something ancient I couldn't name. My skin prickled and I realized I had been holding my breath. When I exhaled, it came out in a trembling cloud, visible in the moonlight. I felt a pulse in the air around me, subtle at first, then stronger, almost like the beat of a heart. And then I heard it, a low, vibrating growl, distant yet undeniable. It wasn't loud enough to be threatening, but it was close enough that I could feel its presence pressing against the edges of my awareness. My first thought was to run, but my legs refused to obey. I was rooted to the spot, mesmerized. Something about the sound resonated inside me, deep in my chest. Stirring emotions I didn't understand. I reached out instinctively, though I didn't know to whom nor what. The air shifted, brushing against my fingers as if something invisible had moved past me. My heart leaped, half in fear, half in something else. Longing, maybe. It didn't make sense. Everything I had ever known told me this was wrong, that I should turn and leave immediately. But I couldn't. The pull was stronger than reason. Suddenly, movement to my left caught my eye. Between two thick pine trunks, a figure stepped into the faint glow of the moon. Tall, broad-shouldered and impossibly still. He watched me with eyes that shimmered amber in the pale light. My stomach twisted, part with fear, part with awe. I had never seen anyone like him, and yet I felt as if I had known him all my life. He didn't speak, didn't move closer, yet his presence filled the clearing entirely. My chest ached with an emotion I couldn't name desire. Yes, but tinged with terror. Something forbidden hummed in the air between us, unspoken yet undeniable. I knew instinctively that this was someone I should never encounter, someone I should run from, and yet I couldn't. The shadow shifted again, this time stepping fully into view. His features were sharp, perfect, and his expression unreadable. And then, in the quiet that followed, I heard words I didn't recognize but somehow understood. A name, my name, spoken on the wind, soft yet clear, carried on the cold breeze. Alara. I froze. My own name, spoken by a voice that didn't belong to the human world, sounded foreign yet intimate. The sound of it sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't know this Manor, whatever he was, but in that moment, I knew my life had changed forever. Something was calling me, something forbidden, something dangerous, and I couldn't ignore it. The wind shifted again, and he was gone, vanished into the shadows as if he had never been there. Yet the ache of his presence lingered, a phantom warmth against my skin. My hands shook, my heart still raced, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have felt this pull. I shouldn't have wanted him, but I did. And that was only the beginning. The next morning, I awoke to the familiar comfort of my small cabin, expecting the ordinary routine to ease the lingering tension from the forest. But nothing was ordinary anymore. Even the sunlight streaming through the frost-covered windows seemed tainted, sharper, colder, as if it were trying to warn me. My hands still trembled when I reached for my tea, and the memory of his amber eyes burned behind my eyelids. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was the imagination running wild. A shadow in the woods, nothing more. Yet when I stepped outside, even the familiar forest edge seemed different. The trees loomed taller, their bare branches twisting in ways that felt deliberate, almost watchful. The wind carried whispers I couldn't identify, a rustling chorus that stopped the moment I turned to listen. No one was there at first. I blamed the cold. I blamed my own nerves. But then the encounters began. The first was subtle, a fox darting across the clearing, eyes glowing too brightly in the morning light. I laughed at myself for being jumpy. Yet the fox lingered, watching me as I moved through the cabin yard, tilting its head with unnerving intelligence before disappearing between the trees. Later, at the market, I noticed the strange looks from neighbors, subtle shifts in their expressions as I walked by. Whispers followed me, not audible at first, but somehow present like a vibration in the air. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, that it was all in my head. But even the mundane world felt fragile, distorted, as if someone or something was threading their fingers through my life. Unseen yet undeniable. That evening, I returned to the forest, drawn by a force I didn't fully understand. The memory of Himtha's shadow, the voice refused to fade. The wind had shifted again, carrying that musky earth-damp scent, and I froze at the edge of the clearing. The ground was scattered with small animal tracks, but none of them looked ordinary. They were larger, deeper, like something heavier than any fox or deer had passed this way. I knelt, examining the prints, and felt a chill creep down my spine. They led straight into the dense part of the forest, the trees arching over in a way that blocked the moonlight. A low hum of sound vibrated through the ground, subtle yet present. And I realized my heart was racing, not just from fear, but from anticipation. Something was waiting for me, something that shouldn't exist in the world I had always known. I turned to leave, reasoning that I was overstepping, that this curiosity could be dangerous. But then I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost indecipherable, yet distinctly my name. Alara. My breath caught, and my instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to obey. It was as though the forest had taken root inside me, holding me in place. Suddenly, movement caught my eye. A figure tall and silent, slipping between the shadows. My pulse jumped, But there was something different this time. He wasn't fully there, more like a silhouette, a presence just at the edge of perception. Yet even from this distance, I felt the magnetic pull of him, the same pull that had haunted my dreams and my waking thoughts. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the sound of my own voice seemed swallowed by the forest. And then I heard it again, a growl, low and vibrating, echoing off the trunks like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. My stomach twisted, a mix of fear and an inexplicable longing. I couldn't look away, couldn't flee. Something forbidden was waiting, and it was coming closer. Days passed and the tension didn't fade. Shadows seemed to follow me through the town, stretching unnaturally, twisting when I looked directly at them. My dreams became more vivid, more real. Amber eyes glowed at the edge of my vision, and I often woke feeling watched, as though he or something like him stood just outside my door. I tried to rationalize it, stress, fatigue, my imagination, but deep down, I knew it was real. Even my friends noticed the change in me. "You've been distracted," one of them said, frowning. "You look different. Tired maybe, or scared." I smiled weakly, brushing it off as overwork or winter blues. But inside I felt frayed, like the ordinary world was unraveling around me. Every shadow, every whisper, every unexplained movement seemed to carry a message I couldn't fully understand. One night, the feeling of being watched became too strong to ignore. I stepped out into the backyard, the wind biting at my skin, and called out softly, "Who's there?" Only silence answered. But the air shifted, heavy and electric, as if someone or something had just moved past me. The hairs on my arms stood on end. The forest beyond the clearing seemed to pulse with life, something ancient and dangerous. Then, unexpectedly, a branch snapped nearby. My heart leaped into my throat. I turned sharply, eyes straining in the darkness, and caught a glimpse of him, or at least a flash of amber eyes in the distance. My chest tightened. It was him, wasn't it? The alpha from my dreams, the shadow in the woods. But he was too far away to see clearly, too fleeting to understand. And yet the presence was undeniable, like a magnet pulling at my very soul. I stepped back, tripping over a frost-hardened root, my fear and desire warring inside me. I had to remind myself that I should stay away, that this was dangerous, that this connection, whatever it was, could destroy me. Yet I couldn't. Every instinct, every heartbeat pulled me forward. When I finally reached the edge of the forest, I noticed something new. Small scratches on the trees, deep and deliberate, arranged in a pattern I didn't recognize. They weren't random. Someone or something had left them there for me. My breath caught. Was it a warning? A message? A promise? I didn't know, but my skin prickled at the thought that whatever had done this was close. Watching, waiting, and then, as if in answer to my fear, a voice whispered on the wind, so soft I almost didn't hear it. Alara. My name carried on a breeze that felt alive, sent a shiver down my spine. I spun around, trying to see him, but there was nothing, only the forest. It's dark and silent, yet pulsing with the echo of his presence. I stumbled back to the cabin, heart racing, and locked the door behind me. My hands shook as I pressed my back against it, trying to convince myself it was all a trick of the mind. But I couldn't. The world I had always known, the ordinary life I had taken for granted, felt fragile, as if one wrong move would shatter it entirely. And I knew deep down that the danger was already here, creeping closer. Quiet but inevitable. That night, sleep came fitfully. The shadows in my room seemed to stretch and twist, whispering promises and warnings I couldn't understand. Every creak of the floorboards made me startle. Every gust of wind sounded like a voice calling my name. And as I drifted into an uneasy half-sleep, I realized something terrifying. My life had changed forever. Whatever this presence was, whatever he was, I was already caught in its pull. And there was no turning back. I should have stayed away, but I didn't. And I knew I never would. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow in my cabin seemed alive, Every creak and sigh of the old wood whispered warnings I couldn't ignore. By morning, I was exhausted, yet some part of me, some wild, reckless parts refused to let go of the forest, the whispers, the unseen presence that had haunted my days and nights. I stepped outside, the frost crunching beneath my boots, and paused at the edge of the trees. The forest had changed overnight, or maybe it had always been this way and I was only beginning to notice. There was a tension in the air, something electric, almost dangerous. My heartbeat quickened. A mixture of anticipation and fear, and then I saw him. He emerged from the shadows as if he had been waiting for me all along. Tall, impossibly broad-shouldered, his movements smooth, silent, like a predator in perfect control. The forest seemed to bend around him, the wind brushing past him without disturbing a single leaf. And yet, it wasn't just the grace of his presence that stopped MIT, was the eyes. Amber, glowing faintly in the dim morning light, locked onto mine. My breath caught. He didn't speak, didn't even blink, but I felt it, the weight of him. Magnetic, overwhelming, and frightening all at once. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to run back to the safety of my cabin, but my legs refused to obey. I was rooted to the frost-hardened ground, trapped by the intensity of his gaze. "You've been here," he said finally, his voice low and smooth, vibrating through the air like a song I hadn't known I remembered. I come here sometimes," I stammered, though the words felt hollow. I knew he knew more than I had revealed, knew every step I had taken in the forest for days now. And somehow that knowledge didn't frighten me as much as it should have. Instead, it drew me closer. He tilted his head slightly, studying me, and I realized this was no ordinary man. His presence radiated power, something ancient and untamed. A low hum of sound seemed to resonate from him, vibrating in the air, threading through my chest. Stirring emotions I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Fear, yes, but also something else? A pull, magnetic and undeniable, that made my heart ache. "You shouldn't be here," he said. And there was a strange softness under the warning, a tenderness that made my stomach twist. "This place, it's not safe for you. I'm not afraid," I whispered, even though my voice quavered. I don't know why I'm here." He stepped closer and the air around him seemed to thrum with life. The scent hit me first wild, earthy, like rain-drenched soil, and something darker I couldn't name. My senses reeled. Then the warmth of his presence, the sheer force of him, pressed into my chest like a tide I could not resist. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated. Softer this time, almost a murmur, almost a plea. "But I'm glad you are." I blinked, confused. Every rational thought in my mind screamed to run, to remind myself of the danger, of the rules I didn't fully understand yet. But the pull of him was impossible to deny. My legs moved slightly forward without my permission, drawn to the force that surrounded him. And with each step, my heart pounded not just from fear, but from something more. He studied me for a long moment, and I felt as if he were seeing every part of me, the hidden fears, the desires I hadn't dared acknowledge, the part of my soul I had tried to keep safe from the world. And yet there was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. "Who are you?" I finally asked, my voice trembling despite myself. He allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I am what you feared and what you've been dreaming of," he said. The words were cryptic, but they resonated deep inside me, striking something primal, something I had tried to bury. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the wind stilled, and I realized how utterly alone we were together, yet connected in a way I could not comprehend. There was danger here, yes, and rules that bound him I couldn't even begin to understand. And yet the pull between us was undeniable, magnetic, and terrifying. "Why do you watch me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I've been waiting," he said simply. "And because you belong, though you don't yet know it." The words sent a shiver down my spine. Belonging to him. The thought was thrilling, frightening, impossible. Everything inside me screamed that I should resist, that I should run. But the moment I opened my mouth to speak again, he was closer. Not threatening, not violent, just there. Presence overwhelming, and I could feel the warmth of him. The strength he exuded like an invisible shield pressing against the chill of the morning air. "I shouldn't want this," said, barely able to form the words. "I shouldn't." "Want you? You shouldn't," he said, and his voice was like velvet over steel. "But you do." The air between us pulsed, electric and alive. I felt my chest tighten, my thoughts jumble, and an ache settle in my heart. Forbidden. Dangerous. Yes. And yet, when he moved his gaze over me, intense and unflinching, I felt something else, recognition, a thread connecting us. Like we had always been part of the same story. Waiting for the moment to collide. He stepped back slightly. Just enough to remind me that the world around us was still dangerous, still forbidden. And yet, even as he retreated into the shadows, his presence lingered in the clearing, a phantom warmth that made it impossible for me to think clearly. My hands shook, my stomach twisted, and my mind raced with questions I didn't dare ask. Who was he? What was he? Why did he know my name? And most of all, why did my heart feel so alive, so exposed in his presence? I wanted to hate him. I wanted to run, to remind myself of the danger, of the rules, of everything I didn't understand. But I couldn't. There was something about him, magnetic, wild, untamed, that pulled at me with every heartbeat. A connection I couldn't explain, couldn't deny, and perhaps shouldn't even try to understand as he slipped back into the shadows, leaving only the memory of his amber eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. I felt a shiver of longing I hadn't felt in years. My pulse raced, my mind spun, and for the first time since I had first glimpsed him in the forest, I knew something undeniable. This was forbidden, dangerous, and utterly irresistible. I didn't know what was happening or what I was becoming, but I knew one thing with certainty. I couldn't stop thinking about him. I shouldn't, I wasn't allowed to. And yet my heart refused to listen. I turned back toward my cabin. Legs unsteady, mind spinning, and felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. The world I had always known, ordinary, safe, predictable, was gone. Something extraordinary had entered my life. Something powerful. Something dangerous, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to leave. The days that followed were a blur of ordinary routines that felt hollow, like I was moving through someone else's life. I tried to focus on work, on errands, on anything familiar. But nothing could erase the memory of him, of the amber eyes. The presence that pressed against my chest and refused to leave. Even the forest, which had always been a sanctuary, now felt like a threshold I couldn't ignore. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Shadows that moved against the wind, sounds that whispered through the trees, and the inexplicable shiver of being watched. But the signs became harder to dismiss. My dreams, once vivid but fleeting, grew more intense. I ran through the forest, my bare feet barely touching the frosted ground. And he was there, always just ahead, amber eyes glowing, waiting. And each time I woke, my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break my ribs. One afternoon, I nearly slipped on the icy steps of my cabin. The wood was slick, but it wasn't the frost that caught my foot. It was a force. A sudden shove I couldn't explain, like someone nor something was warning me. I staggered back, heart racing, looking around wildly. There was no one in sight, just the trees swaying silently in the cold wind. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick of gravity, an accident, but the memory of amber eyes flickered in my mind, and a chill ran down my spine. At work, nothing felt ordinary either. I kept catching glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye. Shadows too quick. Shapes too fluid. People, lore creatures that vanished when I looked directly. I began to notice coincidences that were too precise to ignore. A sudden gust of wind would carry the musky, earthy scent I had first noticed in the forest. Animals, even in the city park near my apartment, behaved strangely, foxes and crows following me, watching with intelligent curiosity before disappearing as if they'd never been there. I tried to speak about it cautiously, My friends and coworkers smiled politely, shrugged off my concerns. "You've been stressed," one said. "Maybe get some rest." But I knew the truth. This wasn't stress. Something had entered my life, something impossible and undeniable, and it was weaving itself into every moment, pulling me closer whether I wanted it or not. I found myself walking the edge of the forest again that evening, drawn by a force I couldn't resist. The air was colder than usual, heavy with the scent of wet earth and something darker underneath, smoky, wild, and sharp. My breath came in ragged clouds, and I felt the pulse of my own heart, racing in time with a rhythm I couldn't name. And then, in the moonlight, I saw him again. He stood partially hidden among the trees, motionless, yet I knew he had been watching me all along. My chest tightened, a mixture of fear and longing that left me dizzy. I told myself to step back, to leave, but my legs moved forward anyway, drawn like a moth to a flame I couldn't name. "Why do you come here?" he asked, voice low and commanding, yet edged with something I couldn't quite place: concern, perhaps, or amusement. I can't stop," I admitted, my voice barely audible. The words shocked me as soon as they left my lips. I had always thought of myself as careful, rational, in control. Yet here I was, standing in the forest, utterly exposed to someone or something that should have been impossible. He stepped closer, and the forest seemed to hum around us, the shadows deepening, the wind stirring just enough to brush against my skin. "You shouldn't be here," he said again, almost a warning, almost a plea. "And yet you come, every time. You can't resist." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. I shouldn't." "Exactly," he said, and there was a strange softness in his tone now, almost human, almost vulnerable. "And yet you do." His words made my chest ache. I wanted to turn away, to reclaim my sense of safety, but the pull between us was undeniable. I could feel it in every nerve, in every heartbeat. Something about him, powerful, dangerous, magnetic, was tethered to me in a way I couldn't explain. And no matter how much I tried, I could not pull free. Days turned into nights, and the pull grew stronger. Shadows followed me into my dreams, stretching longer, moving faster. The amber eyes haunted my thoughts even when I tried to focus on something else. The forest called me, whispered my name in voices I could almost recognize. I told myself it was obsession, that I needed to resist, that the ordinary world was enough. But it never was. And then one night, the danger became unavoidable. I had been walking near the edge of town, a shortcut through a rarely used path behind the library. The moon was bright, casting long silver shadows across the frozen ground. My breath came in quick bursts as I hurried along, thoughts tangled with fear and anticipation. Something felt wrong. The air was heavy, thick, and I sensed movement before I saw it. A low growl shattered the silence. I froze, my blood running cold. From the shadows, a figure emerged, tall, powerful, and impossibly fast. Not him, I thought, relief and terror colliding. But it wasn't human. Not entirely. Fur glinted in the moonlight, amber eyes locked onto me. And I realized with a jolt that the forest had followed me here. That danger had breached the ordinary world I had tried to cling to. I stumbled backward, heart hammering as the creature advanced. It wasn't moving like a normal animal. It was deliberate, calculating, and my stomach twisted with the knowledge that I was utterly defenseless. Panic surged, but then, like a lightning strike, he appeared from the shadows. He stepped between me and the creature, tall and commanding, and the air seemed to shift around him. The growl deepened, vibrating through the ground, but when it met him, it faltered. The creature hesitated, head tilting, before retreating into the darkness. I could barely breathe, shaking, clinging to the realization that he had saved me without a word, without effort. His presence alone enough to command obedience. He turned to me then, amber eyes softer now, almost human, and I felt the pull stronger than ever. "You see," he said quietly, "this world is not safe for you. You can try to resist, but you cannot escape it. I wanted to deny it, to reclaim the rational life I had before all of this began. But as I looked at him, standing there with the power of something far older and more dangerous than anything I had ever known, I knew the truth. The supernatural was not coming. It had already arrived, and I was already entangled in it. I shivered, part fear, part awe, as the realization settled deep in my chest. My ordinary life, safe, predictable, controlled, was gone. Whatever this presence was, whatever connection had begun between us, it could not be ignored. It would follow me, shape me, consume me if I let it. And yet, part of me wanted that. Wanted him. Wanted this pull that made my heart ache in ways I couldn't explain. And in that moment, I knew one terrifying, thrilling truth. There was no turning back. The days after the incident on the path felt like I was walking between two worlds. The ordinary one, the town, my cabin, the mundane routines continued as if nothing had happened. Yet the forest, the shadows, the pull of him seemed to intrude everywhere, threading themselves into my every thought. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't keep my mind from wandering to the memory of amber eyes glowing in the moonlight. I found myself returning to the forest more often than I admitted, drawn by something I couldn't name. That night the moon was full, pale silver spilling across the frozen ground. My breath fogged in the cold air as I walked the familiar path to the clearing, boots crunching softly on frost-hardened leaves. I told myself it was curiosity, maybe even foolishness, but part of me knew it was more than that. And he was there, tall, still commanding as ever. But tonight, he didn't radiate just danger. There was something softer, something human, buried beneath the predator's poise. My chest tightened when our eyes met, and I felt that magnetic pull again, stronger than ever. "You came," he said simply, as if noting my presence was both a statement and a question. I couldn't help it," I admitted. My voice sounded small in the quiet clearing, but he heard it, understood it. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a depth that made my chest ache. He stepped closer, but not too close, as if testing the boundaries of what was safe. The air between us seemed to hum, alive with an unspoken energy. I wanted to speak, to ask the questions that had been swirling in my mind, but my throat was tight. And yet he seemed to understand without words. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. "They fear you. But I feel it. You belong in ways you don't yet understand. Belong." The word struck me like a physical blow. Something inside me stirred a longing I hadn't allowed myself to feel. I wanted to ask what he meant, but another part of me knew that asking could be dangerous. And yet I couldn't pull away. We walked together through the clearing, the crunch of frost under our feet the only sound. He didn't speak much, but the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was intimate, charged, and I realized with a jolt that this was a connection I had never experienced before. My heart raced, not just from fear, but from the magnetic pull of his presence. Something alive and insistent that made the world outside the forest feel impossibly distant at one point. He stopped and looked at me with that same intense gaze. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked, voice low. The pull. The connection. I swallowed hard, unable to look away. I don't know what it is," I admitted. "But it's real, and I can't ignore it." A small, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. "Good," he said softly, "because you won't be able to. Not for long." The tension between us was undeniable. Every movement he made, every subtle shift in posture seemed to pull me closer, even as my mind screamed that this was forbidden. There were rules, boundaries I didn't yet understand, dangers I couldn't name, and still the attraction simmered, impossible to resist. It was both terrifying and thrilling, a storm building quietly, inexorably. Between us, we talked for hours that night, though our conversation was more in gestures than words. The way he studied me, the subtle tilt of his head, the way his eyes lingered just long enough to make my pulse spike it, was intimate in a way I couldn't explain. I found myself revealing things I hadn't told anyone, fears, doubts, dreams, and though I didn't understand how, he seemed to absorb them. to see me in ways no one else had. "You're different," he said at one point. "You're not afraid to feel, not afraid to fight for what matters. That's why I can't stay away." My breath caught. The words were safe, careful, but the implication hung heavy in the air. I wanted to tell him he shouldn't feel that way, that this was dangerous. And yet part of me didn't want him to stop. Part of me wanted every moment, every word, every glance. Then, as the night deepened, the pull of danger returned. I heard a sound low, almost imperceptible, a rustling behind the trees. He stiffened immediately, body tense, and I realized I wasn't imagining the danger anymore. Something else was out there, something alive and alert. Before I could react, he moved fast and fluid, stepping between me and the darkness. I barely caught a glimpse of the shadow that had approached large fast, its eyes glinting faintly in the moonlight. And then it was gone, retreating into the forest at a glance from him. I shivered, heart racing, and he turned to me, calm and commanding. "This world is not safe for you," he said softly. "And yet you keep coming." I can't stop," I admitted again, voice trembling. "I don't know why. You feel it," he said, amber eyes catching the moonlight, glowing faintly. "The connection, the pull, the danger, and it frightens you. But it also excites you, doesn't it?" I didn't answer. My cheeks flushed, heart hammering. It was true. The fear, the danger, the forbidden pull, they all mixed together in a storm that left me dizzy, trembling and unable to look away. He smiled again, almost imperceptibly. "It will only grow stronger," he said. "You cannot resist it, and you shouldn't try." I wanted to deny it, to claim safety, to retreat into the ordinary world I still half clung to. But as I looked at him, standing there like something from my dreams made real, I knew I would not leave. I could not leave. The pull was already inside me, tethered to something ancient, something powerful, something impossible to resist. And then I saw it, a movement behind him, subtle, almost hidden, something that didn't belong. A glint of metal, a flash of unnatural light, and for a heartbeat, I thought my mind was playing tricks. But when he turned slightly, just enough for me to glimpse it, I saw his eyes shift, not amber now, but a deeper golden hue, almost feline, almost feral. My breath caught. The realization hit me like ice water. There was something he wasn't telling me, something primal, ancient, dangerous. And yet, even with that knowledge, even knowing there was a truth I couldn't yet name, I felt the pull stronger than ever. "Who? What are you?" I whispered, but the words barely carried in the night air. He looked at me, the faintest flicker of a smile on his lips, and said nothing. The forest seemed to lean in, holding its breath. And I understood in that moment that I was standing on the edge of something I could never fully understand. That the bond between us was only beginning. I wanted answers. But part of me also wanted him, wanted the danger, the pull, the connection that made my heart ache and race at the same time. Forbidden or not, I couldn't turn away. I was already caught, already tethered, and I knew that whatever secret he held, it would change everything. And in that moment, under the pale silver moonlight, I realized something terrifyingly thrilling. I didn't care. I wanted him, even if it was forbidden, even if it was dangerous, even if it would destroy the ordinary world. I had once known his eyes. That was the first thing I couldn't forget. The way they glowed in the dark, not just reflecting light, but radiating something of their own. No human eyes did that. No human gaze could pierce so deep into me, both terrifying and intoxicating. The image haunted me for days. I couldn't banish it, couldn't rationalize it away as a trick of the moonlight or my imagination. I had seen what I had seen. Something more than human, something raw and untamed, lived inside him. I should have stayed away, but I didn't. I returned to the forest, my steps unsure but unstoppable. The air felt charged, as though the trees themselves whispered warnings in the creak of their branches. My chest ached with both longing and fear. I didn't know what I wanted more, to understand him more, to run before I did. When I found him, he wasn't surprised. It was as if he had been waiting. "You saw too much," he said, his voice low, carrying a weight that made the air feel heavier. "I saw enough to know you're not what you pretend to be." My words trembled, but I forced them out. He tilted his head, studying me, and for a heartbeat I thought I caught a flicker of sadness in his expression. "Pretend," he repeated almost to himself. "No, there's no pretending, only restraint." That word, restraints, I sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to demand the truth, but my throat was dry. Instead, silence stretched between us, the cold night pressing close. Finally, he broke it. "What you saw? What I am. It isn't something you can carry lightly. It will change you. It already has." His words made my stomach twist. I hated how right they felt. I was changing. My dreams, my thoughts, my very heartbeat seemed tied to him now. "Then tell me," I whispered. "Tell me what you are." His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he would refuse. But then, slowly, he lifted his hand and brushed it against the bark of a tree. His fingers curled, nails elongating knot-like claws, exactly, but sharp enough to split wood with a screech. I stumbled back, breath catching. "I'm not human," he said, voice raw, each word weighted like stone. "Not in the way you understand it. I live between what you know and what you fear. The forest is mine. The night is mine. And now?" His amber eyes fixed on me, burning. "You are bound to it too." My pulse thundered in my ears. My body screamed to run, but my heart, traitorous, reckless, ached to step closer. Why me? The question tumbled out before I could stop it. His lips curved in a bitter half-smile. "Because fate is cruel. Because the pull between us was written long before you were born. And because I'm too weak to fight it anymore." The words hit me like lightning. A pull, a fate. My mind spun with questions I wasn't ready to voice. But beneath it all, one truth throbbed. He was dangerous. Not metaphorically, not romantically, literally, and yet I couldn't step away. We walked together again, though now the silence felt differentier, heavier. My thoughts wouldn't still. Every gesture of his seemed edged with something both protective and predatory. At one point, his hand brushed mine, not quite touching, and a jolt shot through me so strong I gasped. He pulled back instantly, his jaw clenched. "You don't understand what I fight every moment," he said hoarsely. "You don't know how close you are to danger. To me." I wanted to ask what that meant. I wanted to tell him I wasn't afraid. But the truth was my heart warred with itself, love tangled with terror, and I had no idea which would win. It should have ended there, with unspoken words and unanswered questions. But Fedor, maybe something darker wasn't done with me later that night. As I made my way back toward the edge of the forest, I heard voices, not his. Others, I froze behind a tree, straining to listen. Too close to the human, one voice growled, rough and guttural. "She'll ruin everything." Another hissed, "He's forgetting what he is. He's forgetting the oath." My stomach dropped. They were talking about him, about me. My breath caught, too loud in the silence, and I pressed a hand to my mouth. The shadows shifted, and I glimpsed them, two figures moving between the trees. Their shapes wrong, too fluid, too tall. Not men, not entirely. Before I could move, his voice cut through the night. "Enough." The other figure stilled. He stepped into view, commanding, radiant with authority. The air itself seemed to bend around him. "She's nothing," one figure growled. "A weakness. And you know what happens when we show weakness?" The words were knives, sharp and cold. My chest constricted. Was that how they saw me? A weakness. His reply came low and dangerous. "Leave her out of this. She is under my protection." The other figures snarled, but then reluctantly melted back into the shadows. I stayed frozen, hardly breathing, until it was silent again. When he turned, I thought I saw relief on his face. But when his gaze landed on me, that softness vanished. His eyes darkened. its expression hardening into something unreadable. "You shouldn't have heard that," he said. "I didn't mean to," stammered, stepping back. My heart pounded with too many emotions, fear, longing, betrayal. But they called me a weakness. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. He closed the distance in a few strides, his eyes fierce. "You're not a weakness," he said, almost angrily. "But they will see you that way. And if they believe it, they will use it. Against me. Against you. Against us both." I wanted to believe him. But doubt gnawed at me. Because part of me wondered, was I a weakness? Was this bond between us nothing but a danger he couldn't afford? I searched his face, desperate for something solid, something real. But all I saw was a mano, something more than a man caught between duty and desire, strength and vulnerability. And in that moment, standing under the watchful moon, the terrible truth crashed over me. I didn't know if I could trust him. He had saved me, drawn me in, opened pieces of himself no one else could. But he had also hidden, restrained, and kept truths buried until I stumbled on them myself. My heart ached with the weight of it. I was falling for him, bound to him in ways I didn't understand. But I was also afraid that loving him would destroy me. Afraid that, to him, I might always be just that, a weakness.